Happy Monday morning, everyone, and welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and whilst we all know that Garfield hates Mondays, I'm hoping that Countdown to Classic listeners love them, as it's time for the news and issues of the week. As you all know by now, it's not my opinion that matters on this show, it's yours. So we spend the next 90 minutes hearing your expert input on the hot button issues regarding the impending release of the sure to be amazing World of Warcraft Classic. If you hear anything on the show that you'd like to comment on, then check out countdowntoclassic.com for all the social links, or email feedback@countdowntoclassic.com with your reactions or memory lane submissions. Also, everyone, I'm now taking short calls to be featured on the show from about 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time onwards on Friday and Saturday nights. So if you want to get something quick off your chest about World of Warcraft Classic in a talkback radio fashion, then hit me up on Discord on those nights. The Discord link can be found in this show's notes, or just look for me at Countdown to Classic. Speaking of taking calls, as you know, Countdown will be running weekly interviews from Wednesdays from now on. I told you it would be Fridays last week, but I've since decided to have them run on Wednesdays. And the first of those to be published will be an 80-minute sit-down with YouTuber Alex Sensual. And that is an interview that you won't want to miss, trust me. In fact, if you hang around through this podcast, at some point I'll be playing a 2-minute sneak preview of that interview. And that's just 2 out of 80 phenomenal minutes, as Alex was, to his credit, open to answering any question I had for him. I only wish it wasn't 4:30 in the morning in Sydney when we did it, and I could have asked the questions I only thought of later. But stick around for that later on. But for now, let's get to the news and discussions of the week with this week's Forum and Fauna. First topic of the week is actually something that came up during my recent interview with YouTuber Alex Sensual that I just mentioned. As the conversation went on, I asked Alex, who is famously #NoChanges to a great extent, if there were a gun to his head, what one change would he allow in World of Warcraft Classic if he had to pick one in a life or death situation. Now, I won't spoil what his answer was, you'll have to hear that on Friday, but it raised the interesting notion to me of the one change that you might regrettably tolerate, or the one change that might have you completely dismiss the legitimacy of World of Warcraft Classic. Luckily, the World of Warcraft Classic subreddit touched on this very issue during the week. Fancy that. And it was through the following post by user Gosu TomTom who posited the following question. What is your no-deal change to World of Warcraft Classic? And that user said the following. Hi guys, just curious. What change would make you say, I'm not playing WoW Classic, if it was added by Blizzard? What can you 100% not tolerate? I know most of us are #NoChange supporters, but I guess most of us would play anyway if there were just a few changes. Where do you draw the line? I asked myself the question, and finally, I think I could live with a graphic upgrade, some bug fixes, and maybe a bit of class balancing at best. It wouldn't be vanilla, but it would be very close to the vanilla experience. But the moment I see LFR or LFG or cross servers, I'm out of here. Those things killed WoW in my opinion. Now, the point with that post, or the reason I'm bringing that up to lead off the news this week, is that it leaves that question hanging. Is there one thing that you could hear announced as being in World of Warcraft Classic that would have you run for the hills? After all the time spent waiting, let's say it's been 1 or 2 years, and all the energy spent talking, reading, listening about it, such as with this very podcast, is there really one thing that would have you not play the game? Now, I'm on the record in the past as saying that I'm very skeptical of players that legitimately, not jokingly, put forward the notion that one thing that they don't like would push them away without even trying the game for a short time. I think there's a bit of blustering going on with statements like that, and those people will either A, still play the game publicly, or B, still play the game secretly, albeit perhaps just to check it out. So the discussion point would be, is Blizzard seriously going to be able to do something to have you walk away from the hype and not try the game? And if so, what would it be? Or will you play the game regardless of your dislike of a certain tweak? Some players mentioned rather mild to medium things that would have them walk away. Others said that the change would have to be pretty groundbreaking to the point that the game was almost unrecognizable. So we have two camps in the situation that the proverbial Titanic that is World of Warcraft Classic started to sink. The first would be the people running for the lifeboats, perhaps dressed up as women and children, whereas the other group are playing on with the band until the very bitter end. Now, as we do here on Countdown to Classic, we argue for both sides of the coin equally, and the first post I bring you is for that lifeboat camp, with this from user Grote86, who says, Battleground Cross Realms is a deal breaker also. Best time I had in vanilla outside World PvP was going up against those asshole Alliance people on my server every night. I always recognized people and it was awesome creating feuds. The server forums were on fire every night. Now we get to play against random assholes who we'll never see again. And that post kind of got me thinking, really? If cross-realm battlegrounds are in the game, then you're out? Bye-bye WoW Classic, game I visited forums for every day and commented on and jumped on the hype train. Toot toot, all stops to Classic. Now, okay, perhaps I'm being a touch hyperbolic when I say that, but this actually came up a lot. Cross-realm battlegrounds. A lot of people insisted that this was something that would really rub them the wrong way to the point that they might jump off the ship. Cross-realm battlegrounds came into the game with patch 1.12, released on August 22nd of 2006. And it basically placed multiple servers in battle groups, essentially, and allowed other players from other realms to square off against each other for the first time. Now, I say it's not even a change if they put that in World of Warcraft Classic. So if you're one of the many people who is so vehemently opposed to cross-realm battlegrounds, and I totally respect your opinion if that is the case, is it the case, though, that you self-identify as a so-called no-changes person? But if Blizzard includes that one facet of the game, which, as I say, I don't think is really actually a change from a certain viewpoint, then you're tapping out completely? Come on, I'm sort of tending to call bullshit here. Now, here's a stat for you. Did you know that cross-realm battlegrounds were in the game for approximately 24% of Vanilla's lifespan? And that's actually not a made-up stat. 40% of people know that. Shout out to Simpsons fans. That's not an insignificant amount of time. I'm not pro cross-realm battlegrounds. I'm really not. I agree with the points on it that it harms the community feel and all of that. But do you think I overly care if they elect to go that way? Particularly to the point that I won't play the game that's arguably the most anticipated game of my life as a gamer? No way. But anyway, I realized that cross-realm battlegrounds were somewhat of a prickly issue for many players. The thought that you were now teabagging people who you wouldn't then potentially see around the traps to perhaps remind them of said teabagging rather bothered some players. But I mean, obviously I'm joking, partially. I do get the benefits and the community feeling and sense of rivalry that came with pre-1.12 Battlegrounds. But anyway, Groat 86 is out, if you do it, Blizzard, so consider yourselves on notice. Perhaps, again, I am being hyperbolic myself, but how far do we take these comments on what will and will not have us play WoW Classic? Well, let's keep finding out as we go back to the well with the I'll still play but I might not necessarily be happy crowd. And the next post I bring you is actually from Countdown to Classic Discord user Northbear. And just a quick note that I put up the topics that are potentially going to be featured on the show in advance on our Discord. And members get to weigh in on what they'd like to hear about. And they also know that a solid comment would probably be more likely to be featured in the show. And I got a lot of responses to this topic, so thanks to everyone who chimed in. And please look for the link to the Discord in the show notes or on the website. But back to Northbear's comment, as they kind of weigh in on the I'm reasonable but I have a breaking point argument with this. Even though I think that flying is the worst thing that has ever been added to the game, I really do try to be reasonable about this sort of thing. I swear. I dislike the whole hashtag no changes movement going on, but I definitely do lean that way. For me to go, oh hell no, and take my toys and go play with myself, giggity, it would have to be something that fundamentally changes the game to the very core. That being said, there are two things that I believe are fundamentally part of the vanilla core. Things that, if altered, would drive me back to a private server for good. 1, player decisions, and 2, server community. With regard to player decisions, I enjoy Warcraft Vanilla because of the small details, because it's the sort of game where you have to make smart decisions or be severely inconvenienced. Do I empty my bags or start heading towards the dungeon? Do I buy a mining pick or train my level 10 skills? Do I really need rank 2 of this ability? The question sounds silly, but having to actively think about the small things like where you're going and what you're doing creates a bond to the game, meaning your character and the people that you play with. And on the second point of no server community, LFG/LFR/cross realms and phasing may help with lag and make the game more accessible to new players, but it damages the server community. I'm not okay with anything that negatively impacts the server community. If I wanted to use looking for group and treat people as a means to an end instead of as an actual human being, then I have retail WoW for that. Now that was an amazing post there by Northbear, and sorry I went on for a little bit, but I wanted to get it all in because I thought it was really, really insightful. And I think that the point they're raising there, and well, it's quite obvious the point they're raising, but I'll extrapolate a little bit. One of the things that retail WoW is hammered for is the removal of any kind of difficult decisions within the game, and that's due to the sort of easy mode feel that players often complain about. Recently, I've been playing retail again, and while it's great to be getting back into it, actually playing World of Warcraft rather than just discussing it, I've been really rather unhappy with what the game has become. And no, I don't want to get into retail bashing, and I'm still enjoying the game, but I just want to give a quick note on what I've actually seen thus far. I didn't believe everything I saw and read about how different the game was now, but it is the case. You weren't lying. All of you. You were telling the truth. I've been getting a little bit more depressed and more understanding of why people are looking forward to Classic so much. I just wanted Classic because, cool, back to the Classic days. That'll be great, man. But I didn't realize that for so many of you, it was that reason combined with the fact of what they were currently playing in retail had become so bastardized. What I've already noticed just in the fleeting time that I've spent in retail is that I don't have to agonize quite as much over things like talent points. Just pick one of 3 every 15 levels and the choices in most cases seem pretty clear cut. Okay, you've given me 3 choices here. One's the chicken, one's vegetables, and the other is the poo-poo platter. I guess I'll take the chicken, thank you. Spells are hand delivered to you when you level up, and frankly, I don't even realize sometimes that they've appeared on my toolbar. I ding, and then I didn't even know for the next 1/3 of a level that I had a new spell. I mean, again, I'm an idiot, but I was like, holy shit, that got there. I'm so used to going to a trainer and picking these things up. That's how I usually know that I've got something new. But there's no wondering now about what unspeakable things you're going to have to do to get that that little bit of money for that rank 5 spell and needing to travel to obtain them and things like that. It felt like a payoff back in the day. LFG and LFR are definitely part of the problem as well that I've noticed. Whilst I had used it before, getting about 6 months of it in very little playtime in pre-Kata as my WoW career was kind of winding down, I still had kind of forgotten what it was like to use it. And I used it recently and bam! I would mark myself up for it and boom! Group formed and you're there in 30 seconds. I'm not even ready most of the time. It's insane. I don't talk to anyone. It's basically like dating me. It's cold and impersonal. I had little to nothing to do with these people that I was running through these dungeons with. It felt really, really odd. Now, I would still play with LFG and LFR in the game, but I would not be a happy camper at all. And I would be close, not quite, but perhaps close to deeming them game-breaking. Anyway, back to the taking their toys and going home camp with user Sithkane, who says this: Transmog. Kinda worried this one isn't getting more attention. Here's hoping it's a needless to say we'd never do it. Please, let us look like clowns for a bit. I want to get excited over full-length cloaks again. And the point that user raises is obviously a bit of a hairy one and one that gets people very riled up, but they do raise a good point. Perhaps it is so needless to say we'd never do it that we're not even really talking about it. I've never seen a topic that technically doesn't form part of the gameplay of the game garner so much hate. And you know what? I agree with the hate. Whilst, as I say, I wouldn't quite quit over transmog being in the game, I would absolutely loathe it. Sure, the argument goes that if I don't like it, then I can just choose to not partake in it. But here's the problem with that. As Reddit user Koyukri points out, a big part of the prestige of items is lost with transmog. I won't get into the detail because we all know part of the fun of vanilla was looking silly in your shitty low-level gear that didn't match, blah, blah, blah. But turning to the pure aesthetic customization of the game, I just don't give a shit, quite frankly. Like I've said in the past, and you may well disagree with me, I've never visited a barber or gone out of my way to obtain any kind of cosmetic change to a character that didn't occur organically as a part of the game in my life. I just don't care that much. I respect that some people do, and hey, horses for courses, but it's just not me. Clearly I'm in the minority though if Blizzard has obviously not only introduced the concept, but made it kind of a big deal, so to speak. I would love to know how many retail players actually use transmog. I'm guessing it's a lot. If you're a lover of transmog and all things customization and you'd like to call into the show to give me a piece of your mind, then please do contact me, as I'd honestly love to hear from you. But yes, I want to know exactly where other people's gear came from, and transmog kind of ruins that a bit, so I guess I partially understand in a way. Back to the maybe I won't quit, but I'll be pissed crowd, with user Akedan, who says, complaining about Quest Helper when everyone knows that everyone is gonna be using Questy. Lol. That's the one thing that would push that user over the edge. And the point is obviously a bit of a tongue-in-cheek shot at not only the notion of a quality of life quest helper type change in the GUI, but the community's reaction to it. Some people have suggested that they would draw the line at quality of life changes, and I've touched on this before, but this comment raises the point again. People rage about in-game quest helpers when virtually everyone will be using Questy or something new that gets designed to help them quest. Granted, the community on the whole seems pretty intimately familiar with quests at this point. When I quested the other day with listener and Discord member Heximus in-game recently, I was genuinely taken aback at how well he knew the route from quest to quest. And he wasn't even picking up the quest. He was a higher level than me. He was speaking to me and just being like, okay, so now you got that quest, you're going to want to speak to this person over here. Oh, and now we're going to have to go over here next. And while we're there, grab this because you're going to need it for later, for another quest. And I didn't even realize I had half these quests, but he was all over it. So my point is that the player base have done so many of these quests so many times that I think they don't believe they're undermining the game in any way by using quest add-ons. And that's something I would somewhat agree with. You've done it once without quote-unquote cheating or a helping hand, so what does it really matter if you're reminding yourself later on with a bit of help? Hence with questy or things of that nature. But my biggest issue, as this post says, is the people who go nuts about in-game quest help, as in something provided to us by Blizzard, but then download the add-on anyway. If you use the add-on, I'm of the belief that you shouldn't particularly care if the quality of life GUI is there. I don't want it there myself because that would be a change, but I won't scream about it because I'll be leaning heavily on every add-on I can get my hands on. Is there one for podcast assistants? Because I could totally use that add-on. Back to the no dealers with user TokiToki1500 who says this. Any balance changes. In fact, anything that changes anything about gameplay, which isn't directly bug fixes. I want vanilla, not improved vanilla. I didn't campaign for improved vanilla. I campaigned for vanilla, alongside everyone else that wants vanilla. Let's have vanilla, and a few years down the road, perhaps we can look at what could be improved in vanilla, and then create a standalone version of that, and leave vanilla being vanilla. You know how you say a word so many times it kind of starts to lose all meaning? Well, we're getting close. But anyway, on that point of class balance changes, something we will be touching on very specifically with Paladins in the very next topic on Forum and Fauna. But would you walk away if classes were changed? If Red Paladins were considered viable, would you walk away? If Discipline Priests had some use, would you walk away? Can my Boomkin please be a badass? And if it were, would you walk away? The point here is that people probably correctly feel that even though such a change may not necessarily affect their personal experience with World of Warcraft, due to not wanting to play the class or spec being rebalanced, they'll still have to deal with it one way or another, be it in PvP or juggling raid spots. At least with the classes as they are, they're a 100% known quantity. We've spent over a decade with the information and playstyles on these specs as they were. You know what's viable. You know what is a shitload more work and may make it tough for a raid invite also. Perhaps work within those boundaries rather than trying to shift the goalposts. I guess on the other hand, I've found it interesting that nobody has been saying, if you don't rebalance the classes, then I won't play. How do you feel? Is this a do or die thing for you? Let me know at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. Next we turn to the following submission for the I'm still going to play regardless argument. And it goes as follows. I've often had issues with the no deal statement, and I know it's somewhat meant to be hyperbolic, but I do struggle to believe anyone who seriously suggests they would absolutely not over a certain thing. But living in that hypothetical world, my no-deal change would have to be so egregious, so huge, so ridiculously grand scale and unthinkable to push me to the point that I say I will unequivocally, without a doubt, not play 1 second of WoW Classic. What could that change possibly be? I couldn't even conceive a rational one. I will inquisitively play whatever is served before me, despite my preference for no changes. Maybe if they gave every player a rocket pack, or a 1 second cooldown ability to one-shot kill mobs, which also works on bosses. The ability to morph into the other faction on the fly to avoid PvP ganking, and the ability to emote for gold. Then I might consider taking my toys and going home. Now, who posted that point on the WoW Classic subreddit? Let's see if I can read this user out. Countdown to Classic. Oh, wait. Wait, that was me. And you know what? I couldn't agree with me more. Great point, Countdown to Classic. That guy really sounds like he's pretty intelligent and great in bed. But seriously, it would take something so outrageous for me not to play this game. Like, say, Blizzard charges $500 a month to play it. And I do not give in to the dark side of nerd rage in suggesting that I won't be a part of Blizzard's evil regime if they make a certain tweak that I am not au fait with. But we move on to one final little point from user Mayo the Instrument, who says this: the only way I'm not playing is if my computer explodes or internet in a 50-mile radius of my apartment is disabled. And to that post I say, finally, someone who is willing to speak the truth. This person's name was Mayo the Instrument. Well, it should be more like Mayo the Sensible. I couldn't agree with this more, and you know what? I go even further, suggesting that you'd have to throw me off a bridge, wearing cement shoes to keep me from playing WoW Classic. Please don't order that hit, just in case you're getting any ideas. I really want to play this game. Anyway, we move on to our second topic of the week on Forum and Fauna. As of now, Countdown to Classic hasn't gotten class-specific on the show yet. I've been keeping it pretty generic, as I've ridden the wave of this first 6 weeks of the show. However, I think it's about time we started to put the spotlight on certain classes from time to time. I hope you'll find this interesting, even if you're not a Paladin, which we're about to get into, or if you've never had any interest in starting a Paladin. Perhaps you're Horde for life and won't get to experience this in Classic, but you'll certainly come up against them in PvP, so I do hope you'll stick around for this topic, and it comes up through the WoW Classic official forums with user Kazog, who started a thread with the following title: "Please fix Paladins before go live." And Kazog gets into it with this: "Please fix Paladins and other ghetto classes before we go live. Classic was very disappointing for us who leveled to 60 after a few months to find that the characters didn't scale. They did patch and enhance the game. The Judgment set certainly fixed a lot of the issues with Paladins, but they rarely got invited to the raids in the first place because they pretty well sucked up a spot on the roster that a mage or a warrior or a priest would be better for. Just saying." So what that post does is it raises this argument. 1, Paladins could be fixed for Classic, versus 2, they're perfectly fine as they are. Now, an important note just before we get into it: I haven't leveled a Paladin past about 20 or so luckily it's not my input that we'll be leaning on, but that of others from the forum, so just keep that in mind when I'm chiming in here and there. But we'll start with that first camp of perhaps they could be fixed a little, with user Redhead Child, who says the following: "Should there be tweaks to class balance? Maybe. I'll leave that to Blizzard to decide, but there shouldn't be any reworks, nor should tweaks be to the base toolkit. As an example, what they could do for Paladins is have them choose their role more through their talents, so that they'd be able to focus more on a DPS role, through having more time attacking and less time being a buff bot, should they so choose. But again, I'm not advocating for class changes. I'm saying if Blizzard does so, it would be minor tweaks and done through talents, instead of the base toolkit, because that could affect the viability of a class much more than the talent changes and could easily make them up by accident." And Redhead Child continues in another post: "Make the DPS tree talents better, deeper down the tree, but have them come with negative effects as well. For example, with Retribution, give them a talent that causes them to deal 150% more holy damage to enemies for 15 seconds, but their healing spells go on cooldown for 15 seconds, meaning they trade a window of healing for better damage. It can replace Blessing of Might, and that blessing can be put into the holy tree, and make casting it increase the cast speed of Holy Light by half a second if used within the next 5 seconds. And remove the blessing's mana cost, meaning the Holy Paladin can now bless, heal, instead of casting heal, heal, stop, stop, heal, heal. It adds a little bit more complexity and lets the healing Paladins focus on buffs/heals/dodge heal versus a more boring rotation of healing/dodge heal. Also, move their ret talent blessing down in the tree and make its duration longer, and move some more crucial healing talents from holy down the tree more as well. But again, this is if Blizzard does class balance, and this is just an example idea. Now, firstly with that post, I just want to say this. I don't know what dodge heal is. Is this poster smoking crack, or have I missed something in my ignorance of Paladins over the years? Anyway, let me know if you guys sort of know straight away. Just email me and say, Josh, you idiot. Dodge heal, of course, it's this. But anyway, I'll move on. The main point that this user is raising is establishing what was the Paladin's viability and what would it take to make Paladins happy who felt that they didn't have a strong enough role in groups or raids. And are their concerns warranted? The Paladin class is generally referred to as a hybrid class. They have 3 clearly different roles by way of their available specs, be it prot to tank, holy to heal, or retribution to DPS, supposedly. However, the common complaint is that despite being given that jack-of-all-trades moniker, it actually resulted in them being handy at jack shit endgame outside of healing. Protection in endgame was supposedly broken, and retribution became somewhat of a running joke. You see some figures like Esfand valiantly trying to prove the community wrong, and showcasing some notable instances of ret paladins being viable when they're all juiced up on pots and being played skillfully. But for the most part, players couldn't make them viable endgame. And as you'll soon see, I do understand that endgame is not the whole game, but we'll get to that. The buff/heal bot is what they basically became reduced to, the bane of many a paladin's existence. Obviously dealing damage while leveling, but then being reduced to doing nothing but healing in endgame. But that role drove some players crazy. Having that blessing just last 5 minutes and then rinse and repeat, and then outside of that, just having their main role be a single target heal bot. Would a seemingly minor change to the time of your blessing fix things a bit? Would talent tweaks fix things? Well, it would certainly change things. Whether or not it fixes them is another question. True, less time buffing is more time doing other stuff. But wasn't much of this buffing happening pre-encounter? Write to me if I'm wrong, Pallies, please. Also, on the minor talent tweaks, I think that's all people are asking for. I don't think anyone is asking for new skills and spells. That would be insanity. But anyway, now we move to the camp that say Paladins were actually fine, for the most part, with user Seraph Song, who says this. Paladins were must-have classes in raids. You're talking about garbage-tier ret paladins who insist on trying only to DPS with a class that has 3 abilities that do damage and 30 that heal, buff, and support. And that user's point is that outside of retribution, Paladins absolutely had a place in raids for protection and holy, and were essential to a successful raid. While prot may not have been optimal, you perhaps could get away with the odd off-tank being a pally, and holy Paladins were essential healers to have come along, with the added benefits of their blessings along with awesome single-target heal spams. However, when it comes to ret, it has been a complicated history. Blizzard was still making significant changes to Paladins to address major spec issues as late as patch 1.9 when AQ was released, when a significant class review took place and we saw some of the following changes. There was an overhaul of their talent trees that contained such significant changes to their talents that Paladins had all their talent points refunded in order to reflect the sweeping changes that took place. Paladins were finally given greater blessings. Greater blessings cast the associated blessing on all raid members that share the same class as the target. Additionally, greater blessings have an increased duration of 15 minutes, something which was huge at the time. And then there was a litany of other changes that came in. Seals and judgments saw added or increased damage per level so that these spells kept pace between replacements. Judgments that placed a debuff on their victim now had their duration refreshed when the judging paladin struck the victim with melee swings. Seal of Righteousness now did holy damage on every swing. Seal of Command procced more often. Judgment of Command saw a significant damage increase. Judgment of Righteousness saw a significant damage increase. And all seals and judgments had their bonus coefficient from plus spell damage reevaluated. Some holy damage effects had no coefficient before, and now they did. All of these changes were done because Blizzard clearly realized that something was up with the damage that Paladins were outputting. It was deeming them virtually useless outside of being a pure utility or healing class. But aren't they supposed to be a hybrid class, you ask? These changes were done in the interest of keeping players engaged in a class that they didn't initially pick in order to play the role of a healer or buff bot or off tank. Some people thought they might have been picking a damage dealer. But Paladins clearly were not meant to be a DPS class. Even in the jack of all trades argument, perhaps it was supposed to be a jack of some trades. So why are you trying to make the Paladin a DPS machine? You don't see many hunters trying their hand at tanking, ignoring their 30 DPS spells because they have a pet. Nah, bro, I'm a tanking hunter. I got 2 things here that let me take a tiny bit of heat from mobs. I'm gonna run with this tank thing. And if I can't do it, then Blizzard is going to hear about it. Ret wasn't only historically awful, it was boring, so I'm told. Seal, judge, seal, wait for cooldown, then judge again, and repeat, and repeat. But then, I guess it wasn't the only class that had a boring rotation, so to speak. Ask any Frost Mage how theirs went. I think I'll start with a Frostbolt, then maybe I'll try another Frostbolt. Next, I guess I could go for the hat trick, with a Frostbolt. And yeah, you know what? Just to mix things up, I think I'll finish with a Frostbolt. That seems to be the rotation that many Frost Mages talk about. But Red was the only thing that needed fixing, right? Well, the next post disagrees and says actually this hybrid class was shitty at more than just Ret, with this post from user Colinor who says this. I played a Pally along with Rogue and Warrior in Vanilla and for almost all of Vanilla. While I was never in a top raid guild, I played with some damn good players. I sought out tank gear, tank spec'd according to every min-max way, and I absolutely could not hold aggro. If the DPSer was even half good, they would strip the mob off me. One of my healer friends was a high-end raid healer. She was awesome and patient and racked up a ton of repair costs because even in my blues and BOE purple gear, she drew mobs like moths to a flame. One of the most disgusting parts was seeing DPS warrior specs in good gear and a shield out-tank me in prot spec and gear. And unlike today's game, Vanilla actually made you maintain aggro, use fight mechanics and things like that. You couldn't just blitz everything down in a matter of seconds. The worst though was player attitudes back then. I probably would have healed in raids if I didn't have so many raiders back then shitting all over me because I dared to have a spec that they found laughable. I can't count the number of times I got whispers from a player telling me to get with it and get some cloth healing gear, noob. I loved Vanilla for the gameplay. I loved Burning Crusade more. I felt it kept the gameplay needs that Vanilla required, but fixed many of the issues with Vanilla. Yeah, my Pally leveling was less stressful than when I leveled my warrior, but endgame warriors back in Vanilla were the biggest prima donnas. Nothing irritated them more than the idea of any other class tanking. And the point with that post was, well, actually, tanking as a Pally kind of sucked as well. Holding threat, even with fantastic gear, was just not possible with the tools that were in the arsenal. Fights took longer to complete in Vanilla, we all know this. Maintaining aggro was key to a party's success, and thus, why would anyone want to bring a Pally tank? At the end of the day, all it did was potentially make a run harder, or more expensive in repairs, and frustrating for other players. Even in the scenario that you studied hard and did all you could do to go as hardcore prot as you could. And as a result of this, you were effectively bullied into being holy and nothing else. What? You're a paladin and you're not a dedicated healer? Pally's not a healer, Pally's not a healer. And I hear he's totally got cooties. So what gives, Blizz? Why can't I has everything? You've only left me with one damn spec as an end game Pally. Well, we turn back to the there's nothing wrong with them camp with user Broken Wind, who puts in the following. Play the hybrid, pay the tax. I played my Pally at level 60 and enjoyed being jack of all trades. Pallies are easy mode and indestructible and useful for 99.99999% of the game. I have absolutely zero sympathy for players of the class who feel they are entitled to continue that trend into raiding. Deal with it. If you think that the other tools of a Pally are inconsequential, then by all means roll a warrior instead. Want to enjoy raiding as a Pally? Put on the chain/cloth dress and start healing. Enjoy everything else outside of raiding as a Pally with no restrictions. And the point that user raises is a relatively good one. Yes, if you want to raid, then you may have issues, but there is much more to World of Warcraft than raiding. This user actually went on to say something in another post, and I'm massively paraphrasing what they said, but they went on to say that there were many options for gameplay at level 60 outside of raiding. So go and enjoy them. Run some PvP. Turn into a master crafter, and I'm not sure what else is pretty much raiding, but the notion that raiding isn't the be all and end all, at least from a design perspective, is certainly one that you see being put out there quite a bit. But this poster's main point is that you Paladins went into this knowing that you were playing a hybrid. It's not master of all trades and shitty at none. That was never the deal. So rather than asking for help in a few departments, accept the ones that you are strong at and either learn to embrace them or don't participate them and find another element of the game to enjoy at level 60. Also, if Blizzard does happen to address Paladin concerns yet again, what kind of slippery slope does that create in relation to other classes? Would all hybrids now have to be changed so no one feels left out? The druid that can kick ass at everything? Does every spec have to be readdressed to be awesome? How about we give Shadow Priest the ability to top DPS charts when played well while we're at it? Where does it end? Doesn't that put us in a retail type situation where everyone is awesome and we all get trophies for turning up? I thought the point of vanilla was, to be vanilla. If you want vanilla with Paladin sprinkles, then I have an awesome game recommendation for you. It begins with an L and it ends with an N. Did you guess it? But anyway, we go back to the yeah, but still camp with user Somafira, who says this. Yeah, blessings need to be toned down, or else Alliance has a pretty big advantage all around. It's ridiculous to have a few abilities skewing the balance so heavily towards one faction. And the point of that post is actually quite interesting, a suggestion to actually nerf Paladins even further. And it comes through the perspective of the faction differences, which is something that I must admit I'm guilty of forgetting about from time to time. It's easy for me to disregard the fact that half the player base doesn't even have access to these abilities in vanilla, which obviously can have massive ramifications in raids or in PvP. Remember the days when you could rub a Horde player's nose in the fact that your faction had all those cool buffs with Paladins? Or Horde players? Remember the time that you could retort with, oh yeah, well we've got Ellie Shamans. I kid. I'm joking. I do think Shamans are cool. And I really actually want to roll one as an alt in Classic. But I digress. This poster is actually suggesting that the fact that Paladins are so much more beneficial to a raid group than Shamans are, that they should be tinkered with in the opposite direction. Bring them down a peg so that there's no clear advantage for the Alliance over the Horde in terms of the one faction-specific class that they had access to. Was it that obvious that blessings won the arm wrestle over totems in the great utility debate of November 2004 to January 2007? What do you think? Do you think it was obvious that the Alliance won in the Paladin versus Shaman debate? Email feedback at countdowntoclassic.com and let me know your thoughts for a chance to be heard on a future episode. But back to the shut up and deal with the crowd with user Teleris, who says this: No! Paladins do not need to be fixed. Paladins had a set role in game, and a comfortable one at that. As a vanilla Paladin player myself, I wouldn't be happy if these changes were made. Paladins were extremely useful, and the most desired healers if you knew how to play it properly. We don't need to be buffed, as that would not only fuck over other classes, but then everyone and their mother would be playing Paladin, thus making raid spots harder to find because of playing an oversaturated class. Not to mention more people competing with you for loot. Keep in mind, I'm only speaking for myself here. I could be entirely wrong, and Paladins may need a buff. I'm just speaking from personal experience. Besides, have you even played the other specs in PvP? Paladin is so powerful in PvP, it's not even funny. If you want to DPS, go play a rogue, a mage, a lock, or whatever. If you want a tank, play a warrior. And the point of that user is this: why are people calling out for Paladins to all of a sudden be overpowered? Do you realize what that does to a class in terms of overpopulation? You should be happy that not every man and his dog wants to be a Paladin, and that you're relatively unique and not a dime a dozen warrior or hunter. The fight over gear is not a particularly fun one, so leave a class with its negative points so that people think twice about rolling one, and only the people who are prepared to deal with the issues are going to go through the grind, because at the end of the day their love of the good outweighs the hate of the bad. But also, in coming at it from another interesting angle, that of PvP, I definitely remember as a shitty rogue who dabbled in PvP only very occasionally, almost never being able to bring down a pally. Those fuckers didn't know the meaning of the word die. Bubble, heal, smash, heal, smash, heal. I was only able to bring down the AFK ones, and even that was a tough fight. Do you have recollections of Paladins being awesome in PvP? Unkillable is a term that you see floating around the forums a lot when people discuss pally questing and pally PvP. Do you agree with that assessment? If so, well, there you go. There's a huge portion of the game in which you rule as a pally. But obviously PvP doesn't float everyone's boat. So the raiding argument almost inevitably always pops up again. But that's been a deep dive on a specific class issue, and one that has been reasonably loud and controversial since Classic was announced. If you'd like to weigh in on this topic, you can also call into the show on Friday and Saturday nights from 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time onwards. Just shoot me a message on Discord at Countdown to Classic. But that brings us to our third and final topic of the week on Forum and Fauna. And this was a topic that caught my attention on the forums, asking a question about quest additions to Classic. Now, I can hear you screaming, "What the fuck? This no changes guy sure does talk about changes a lot. What a retail sellout." However, if I may preemptively parry that barb and say that, sure, I could not talk about it because it's my show and I choose the topics, but I want to talk about the interesting things that you're all talking about, even if it is just hypotheticals. And frankly, where's the fun in the changes versus no changes discussion if there is no discussion? God, I can't wait until Blizzard just tells us what's happening with the game. That will drastically change the content of this show when it does. Anyway, this was the post that kicked it all off from Hall of Fame username. And by God, do we get some good ones that appear on this show. PM me your PM'd nudes, who created a thread titled, "If anything was added to the game, I'd actually like quests." And they said the following: "Adding dungeons and raids would be difficult to add without it feeling like it's just adding to a carrot on a stick playstyle, like retail WoW has become with the constant dungeons, raids and expansions being added regularly, making previous gear pointless. It could maybe be done well, but it wouldn't be worth considering, if ever, until much later. Although, quests would just be more things to do for fun. More opportunity to explore places that quests might not currently lead us. Maybe even a way to help with reputation grinds that are currently too difficult. That one I'm not sure if I'd want or not. This is one thing I like about old school RuneScape. The game stays the same. No previous levels, items, or progress is useless, but they add quests for players to have new experiences in an old style world. Quests are what I feel most people enjoy a lot about WoW, specifically the well done ones. They feel like they add a lot and don't harm much, if anything, if done well, as long as they're not pointless fetch quests that are simply a means to suck up time and reward players with easy gear or reputation. Even if all the added quests did was add mounts that are currently in the game files but haven't been released, that would be a nice cosmetic option. It doesn't need to be gear or reputation, just something to give us some extra adventure and a fun reward. So, where one would think controversy and rage would flow, there was actually a relatively measured discussion on this point. There are two schools of thought here that get a bit more specific than simply changes versus no changes. And they are that one, yes, Blizzard either left some unfinished business behind in Classic with the quests, or they could potentially add new ones, versus two, no. The lack of quests is what made up the very core of vanilla, and the fun of the game lay in having to grind for those last few levels. So, we begin with that first camp, sheepishly asking for more quests, with this post from user Zyle, who says this: "Even though I'm one of the ones that wants everything exactly as it was in vanilla, this would be really cool, especially if it finished some of the quest lines that were planned for vanilla but never really got a chance to play out, or added in more unique class quests." The OP, PM me or PM'd nudes, got back to that user and added this: "Yeah, I'd really like them to add in the originally planned quests, at the very least. There's a lot of things that were cut due to seemingly good reasons, like the Dragon Isles and Emerald Dream raids. Although, quests were clearly cut because of time constraints. If I'm going to pay $15 a month and there be no updates, at least one big update of all the original stuff that would have been added, if there was enough time, would make me extremely content with paying that monthly fee." Now, the point these users raise are that even a diehard no changes fan would quietly be okay with this. Now, I know it's not all of you. I'm just talking about this person. Granted, a lot of you are screaming right now going, "No, that's not what no changes mean. This person's not a part of our crowd. Screw that." And I understand that. And I guess it really does actually have me questioning their definition of being no changes. But I really think that there are more people who are a bit more secretly some changes than they think. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You want whatever you want, but I digress. Look, finished quest lines is the first major point for this argument. A lot of players whinged back in the day about clearly unfinished quest lines that just kind of stopped without resolution to the overarching narrative of what it was you'd been tasked with doing. Or they just felt light or broken or inconsequential. Infamous examples include, of course, things like the Ravenholt faction and how the devs working on the rogue class questline or reputation grind were unable to kind of finish that up to Exalted. And then you had things like Azshara as a whole, which a lot of players have sort of thrown under the bus as just being flat out incomplete. Swamp of Sorrows, Winterspring, areas like that that just got torched for feeling really undercooked and a general lack of anything really, even though a lot of players did still visit those areas. Just in terms of quests, people said that there wasn't a lot to do there. The Black Shield quest from the Burned Out Inn between the Barrens and Dustwallow Marsh, a lot of people wondered what was up with that quest not really going anywhere. The Druid Aquatic Form quest, Trial of the Sea Lion, a lot of people had issues with. The Shade of Aranicus quest was another one that came up a lot that people felt was clearly meant to lead somewhere else but didn't. Perhaps obviously people have theorized that was where we were going to start going down that path to the Emerald Dream, but it never ended up happening because that was pulled from vanilla. Now, some people feel that finishing content that was clearly originally planned to be in vanilla wouldn't be cheating with a change in Classic. It's effectively giving us something that was kind of already there, but with a new hat, I guess. I must admit I'm incredibly torn on this personally. I'd far from dislike it, but part of the fun was the warts and all approach of vanilla. Now, the following post in the I'm not so sure camp seems to somewhat reflect my feelings on the issue, as user Ponies Love Kittens tells us. I'm not completely and totally opposed, but if this were done, I'd want it to be done sparingly. A few shout-outs, sure. Add a joke quest about, you think you do, but you don't. Yeah, that would be completely reasonable, in my opinion. If they added in the suspiciously missing shaman and druid quests, I wouldn't fight against that. Or there was that awesome Dustwallow Marsh quest chain with a great story that just randomly ended in the middle of the woods for no reason, and they didn't get around to finishing it until Burning Crusade / Wrath. Adding in the go back to Jaina thanks quest rather than having it just completely stop in the middle of the woods for no obvious reason with no reward and no conclusion. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Sure, here and there, a few quests would be okay. But if they do this, I'd want them to be very careful about it. For example, I would specifically want them to not add enough quests to make it easy to quest all the way to 60. I think that having to grind out the last few levels was an important part of the vanilla experience. I would absolutely not want them to add any vehicle quests or phasing quests, and I definitely want them to not add in quests that trivialize any of the rep grinds. Being exalted with Ravenholt and Timbermore and so forth should be rare, not something that people do just because. And absolutely no dailies. Daily quests weren't added until Burning Crusade, and they represented a fundamental shift in design philosophy. Yes, vanilla had some repeatable quests, rep turn-ins and so forth, but none of this log on every single day and do this one thing over and over and over nonsense that became standard in later expansions. I'm willing to consider adding quests, but there are a lot more quests that I would want them to not add than quests that I'd want them to add. This might be a thing that's safer to not touch. And that user is pretty much spot on a reflection on how I feel about this issue. I could tolerate a couple of tying off of loose ends, but not to the point that it fundamentally changes how we level or attain rep. I couldn't agree more, basically, that part of the fun, yes, the fun of vanilla, was the fact that there weren't enough quests to get to 60. Just chain-killing mobs on that slog to the final ding was tedious, yes, but you knew you had to get it done. And you'd come that far, there was no way that a lack of a few quests was going to stop you from getting to 60. And daily quests? Oh my God, I hate them. I really, really do. It was easy gold when they were introduced, and it changed the whole economy in my mind for the worse. Everyone was kind of all of a sudden flush with cash now because they could just knock out their dailies for virtually free money. I was rich in vanilla. I liked feeling elite because it was all I had. I was terrible at the game, but at least I was rich, bitch. And some people on my server knew that. They knew I was rolling in it, and they knew that I had a certain foothold in the auction house game. Please don't take away the one thing that my smarts brought me in the game. No dailies, thank you, even though I'm sure there's absolutely no way that this would happen in vanilla. And I think it's just silly that we'd probably even raise that point. Right, Blizzard? Right? Anyway, back to it being something that could work with user Slaint Math, who says this. Just make sure the quests are in the spirit of vanilla. Long adventures, traveling long distances. Set it up so that the quests lead into other zones, which then lead back into the first zone, but a couple of levels higher. That was what I loved about vanilla. I hated the idea of just entering a quest hub, completing all the quests, leaving it forever, then rinsing and repeating. That's a very good point by this user, and it effectively raises this. Hey, Blizz, we might be receptive to this if you made it feel all vanilla-y, you know? Can you do that? Can you still do that, Blizz? Can we trust you, Blizz? Come on. Some people feel that they can't. As user Warchief Gammon points out, I don't trust Blizzard's writing. Do you want epic XD reference quests like the Red Ridge John J. Keeshan trash or similar? And that's a good point that War Chief Gammon points out. Blizzard did seem to get very cute and heavy with their humour in the expansions. Whilst there's no doubt that there's humour in vanilla quests, it just seemed a bit heavy later on and it rubbed some players the wrong way. What happened to the war? Why are we being asked to laugh all the time and go on cute collection quests rather than serious ones? Have all the original writers moved on or are they still around? Get on the case. Come on, Blizz. But it's true. I too loved the long-haul trucking feel to vanilla quest lines. It's so counterintuitive to how you think a successful game would work. Let's make this a really long quest to finish. No, not difficult, just long. But it worked. And if they could recapture that magic feeling, then perhaps it would be okay if Blizzard finished off their quest lines. But we go back to the perhaps this isn't such a great idea camp with user Slim Sturge, who says this. If quests are added, what kind of gear or rewards would you feel would be appropriate? Itemization from vanilla was pretty restrained, so I'd be concerned that any new gear these quests introduced might be way overpowered. That's an interesting point. There are other factors to take into consideration. It's not just as simple as plugging in new quests. What effect would those quests have on the game's ecology, so to speak? What do quests come with? Rewards on completion. And what are those rewards at times? Items. So what are we going to do now? Introduce new items into the game? They won't be trash because then there would be no point. But new items equals new content. And new content makes Countdown to Classic a nervous panda. There is, of course, the suggested fix of just having any new quests that finish off an unfinished quest line only give experience as a reward, which sure, that might be a good solution. As user AsShare points out, I'm okay with only experience. If gear was added, it would cause an uproar. And yes, AsShare, to your point, I agree. Perhaps only slightly more of an uproar than there would be if they announced new quests. But time shall tell. Back to the come on, be a sport camp with user Augustine, who says, I'm fine with it on 3 conditions. 1, it was originally planned for vanilla. 2, the content has an authentic vanilla flavor to it. And 3, it doesn't trivialize any existing content and the rewards don't cause a power creep. Number 3 is the toughest constraint to deal with, especially as you add more and more content. I don't think any of this kind of content should be available at launch. Getting the game out there should be the focus right now. New content under those conditions would be cool, however it's a risky endeavor as it threatens the authenticity of the vanilla experience. So if no new content is added, it would be fine by me. And that user's point is, can we trust them not to trivialize other well-known vanilla content? Wouldn't it be best to err on the side of caution and not add any new quests? Well, perhaps it could be done, adding new quests, if those strict guidelines were followed. But something like the Dragon Isles or Emerald Dream that was planned but eventually cut from vanilla? Get out of town with that stuff. That's absolutely crossing the line, in my opinion. It's kind of even crossing the line finishing something as basic as the Ravenhold quests, as far as I'm concerned. But, I would get over it. For those people screaming for content at the release of Classic that would effectively make Classic an expansion in a way, I would say, please, let's cool our jets, guys. Let's cross that bridge if we have to a year or so after Nax is out. And even then, gosh, that'll be like season 4 of Countdown to Classic by then. But the new vanilla expansions, yikes, that's a hairy topic. I had some really fun suggestions in the Discord channel, actually, like level 60 South Seas content and turning Azshara into a fully fleshed out war zone or raid area. But as I say, I just think that's an argument for another day. Maybe. But the final post for this week's Forum and Fauna in the negative camp against new quests in Classic is this one from user Shut the Fuck Up a Cutout Last, who says this. Very eloquently put there. probably sums up a lot of listeners' feelings right now. And now that I've got your blood pumping with rage, you know what that means. It's time for anger management. Each episode, Countdown to Classic comes to you with some of the angriest posts that I've found in the forums through the week. And this week I begin with Discord user Minoru, who says this: I remember plenty of times back in the day when we were stomping a match in Warsong Gulch, but the enemy team took our flag, so we couldn't make the final cap. Then they defended with all 10 players. Why couldn't they just drop the flag and let us win? They knew they had no chance. They were just wasting everyone's time. On the other hand, if we were on the losing end and we had their flag, I'd defend it to my dying breath. Earn your win, suckers. I knew full well it was hypocritical, but I just couldn't help myself. Next, we have user Wrathpex regarding Paladins with this post. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Simple. Pallies can heal and buff. I don't get what's broken. Seems the OP wants them to be broken. Next, we have user Malexi with this one. Classic is not the chance for Blizzard to go back and fix things because it's 2018 and not 2004 to 2007. Blizzard had their chance to make changes and they chose not to. Keep Classic as a snapshot in time for better or worse. Next we have user Ordekai who says this. It's always the Paladins on the live forums and in Classic. It's a never-ending plea to make you even more ridiculous than your class already is. And finally, I must thank Discord user Nomon for pointing this beauty out from Renegade 453. You guys are full of shit asking for cosmetics. Vanilla players never wanted and never will want stupid fucking dress-up cosmetic pink pony pathetic ass mounts in the game. That's what made vanilla great in the first place. Dead serious fantasy content. Play Legion if you want quests everywhere and ponies. God, I hate you people. The question is, how the fuck can people seriously cheer for this nonsense? It's ridiculous. Play fucking Legion. Please, I'm asking you politely. Well, if that's them asking politely, I'd hate to see them being rude. But anyway, with all that, now it's time for winners and losers.
It wasn't going to be easy, but they've won it.
Each Monday, Countdown to Classic brings you the week's winners and losers from the forum posts that we've gone through. And I begin with Discord member 7 Winters, who says the following. Most changes I wouldn't quit over. Even if they did something stupid they definitely shouldn't do, like, say, add Death Knights. I wouldn't like it, but I wouldn't quit over that. And I agree, 7 Winters. But seriously, can you imagine if they added Death Knights to Classic and J. Allen Brack presented it on stage? Would he make it out of there in one piece? That would be crazy. But the next one is from user Grind for Life, who says this. I agree. Even if some crazy shit gets implemented, I'm highly skeptical of people outright disregarding trying Classic. I'm sorry, but playing on private servers fucking blows. And I guarantee everyone saying they wouldn't even buy the game are lying to themselves. Anyone who's interested in Classic WoW is going to try Blizzard's version that they implement. Whether they hold that audience is another thing entirely. Here, I'm all for sanity, and that was a very sane approach, Grind for Life. Thank you. Now, the next post is regarding, again, the changes that you couldn't live with user Gosu TomTom, who says this. Man Creek's wife is right here. Ha ha ha, yeah, that would be terrible. And I agree. That would be an interesting change to the game where they just told us where Man Creek's wife was. And we cut to another Discord member with Pal Furus, who goes into a bit of a Monty Python quote here, and I might try and get a little bit Monty Python, but not too much. I don't want you guys going nuts and cringing. But Pal Furus says this. This is what they would consider not playing WoW Classic over. Not leaving the level cap at 60. To paraphrase Monty Python, first shalt thou take out the holy pin, then shalt thou count to 60, no more, no less. 60 shall be the number thou shalt count, and the number of the counting shall be 60. 70 shalt thou not count, neither count thou 59, excepting that thou then proceed to 60. 80 is right out. Once the number 60, being the 60th number, be reached, then lobbest thou thy holy hand grenade of classic towards thy foe, who, being naughty in my sight, shall snuff it. Put more seriously, I like raiding in dungeons, and while leveling is fun, raiding/dungeons were the main course for me. Don't make me grind another 10, 20 or whatever levels. And I really enjoyed that, Palfurus. Thank you. I'll always enjoy a good old Monty Python quote. But we move on now to a couple of posts that were the winners in the Paladin arguments that we heard earlier. And the first comes from user Mogar, who says this. You're trying to fix something that isn't broken. Hint, this is vanilla, not Legion. Vanilla is about a myriad of things. Questing, exploring, professions, PvP, dungeons, role-playing, and yes, raiding. Legion is just about raiding. So I understand why people like the original poster don't understand that vanilla is simply balanced differently. It's balanced like an RPG, not a raid simulator. But still the point remains, you need to adapt to vanilla, not the other way around. And the second post comes from user Veta, who says this. I didn't bother to read 11 pages, but as someone who played Paladin, no, Paladins weren't bad outside healing. Just not enough players theory crafted how to make them work well. And the ones that did, like myself, didn't share the information with every single person because a lot didn't care. Prop Paladins were amazing for mob packs and dungeons. Sit and get wreck counters for extra threat and DPS. 65% plus block chance, can use rank 1 for the block percentage, just less return damage. Plenty of item effects were meh for warriors, but rocked for Paladin. Crest of Retribution with Thorium Spike. Sank Aura. Holy Shield is so much return damage and threat. Not to mention there was Tier 1 after patch that had a group heal, extra heals, and threat, double chance to proc items with Seal of Righteousness. Silent Fang, trinkets, Iron Foe, plus weapon swapping wasn't very well known or used, but you could use Soul Reaver swap to Demon Fork or Soulbreaker, which all three got added damage/heal from your SP/HP. And let's not get started with Ret. They are fairly capable DPS that don't need to top DPS charts because they provide raid-wide buffs, dispels, off heals, or even switching to heals on certain boss fights, raid wipe protection, healer saves, nightfall capability, etc., etc. Too long, didn't read. There's a lot of unique things in the game. Discover them and figure out what is good for your class. And the final winner of the week is just something that really made me laugh on the WoW Classic subreddit, where user OG Goo posted the following under the title, Literally an Unplayable Game. And they had a picture of the typo when reading a hallowed scroll for a priest quest that read, Feel blessed that your spirit was not released to the nether. And your was spelt Y-O-U''RE, obviously not being Y-O-U-R. And obviously the joke was that makes the game literally unplayable. Ha ha ha. But the winner of the week was actually user Undoer's reply, who said this. You're think you don't, but you're do, which I really did giggle at. But anyway, as we know, when there are winners, there's got to be a loser. And as I do, names shall be left out so as to not hurt anyone's feelings. But the loser of the week was this post regarding Paladins. It's an easy solution. If you don't want to play a pally, don't play one. Watch early interviews about classes. Pallies were designed for children to play and be able to not die too much. That's the purpose of a pally. They fill their role. If you're not a child and you want a much more promising endgame experience, then play a different class. Wow. I've got to say, that's not very nice. What do all you adults feel about that post calling you out for playing a pally? Screw that. Every class is an adult's class in World of Warcraft, and I think particularly pallies given some of their responsibilities. Anyway, with winners and losers all out of the way, now it's time for Memory Lane. Each Monday, Countdown to Classic brings you a few listeners' funniest or most memorable stories from back in the vanilla days of World of Warcraft. And after my impassioned plea for Memory Lane submissions last week, everyone and their dog sent me one. So I say thank you, listeners. You really did get back to me and help me out on this one. I actually got too many, so I'll have to spread them out through the week. So look for more, perhaps in Friday's episode, just so those of you who wrote in and don't hear it being read out today don't freak out, thinking, fuck that guy, I put my heart and soul into that story, and the bastard isn't even reading it. I swear, guys, I'll get there, I promise. But we start this week again with Discord member North Bear, and again, if you're in the Discord, everyone, I'm probably going to lean towards what you send me, but I'll try obviously not to do the same people every week, don't worry too much. But North Bear tells us the following story. Way back in the long time ago, before I was known as North Bear, Saviour of Azeroth, Slayer of Titans, and Crusher of Kil'jaeden, I was known as Nevax, the feeble level 20 Dwarf Paladin. And this is the story of his very first honour kill. Many moons ago, on a crisp spring evening in 2005, I was treated to my first real world PvP experience. The Horde attacked Sentinel Hill, and I was lucky enough to catch the festivities. I stood by the entrance to the town as the battle raged on a ways off, unflagged, but still not straying too far out. As the battle subsided, I made my way out to see what I could see. Maybe they dropped loot, or I could at least get a closer look at a Tauren. Not too far from the tower, I stumbled upon a level 20 undead warlock. He looked sickly, hunched over in pain, probably from running all the way here from God knows where. Our eyes locked. He noticed me, and I noticed him. He didn't have a jaw, so he didn't say much. It was at that moment I decided that as mayor of Pound Town, it was my job to give this guy a tour. Holding my breath, I leapt into battle, charging for the disgusting undead monstrosity. After getting stuck on a fence, my stubby dwarf legs finally bumbled into the target. Judgment, auto attack, seal of whatever, stand there. The duel rumbled and tumbled on for what seemed like forever before I towered proudly over my defeated foe, sprawled upon the dirt. It was this moment in time that started a decade-long love affair with everything PvP. I would later go on to make a Bubble Hearth macro and cast Judgment on many, many sheep's targets. This was also the day I discovered the effects of level 60 Wind Fury on a level 20 body. About 10 seconds later. And I can imagine exactly what would have happened. So thank you very much for that submission, North Bear. But we move on to the next one with listener Espion, who says the following. A teensy tale of terrible team play. For weeks, my guild dutifully worked our way through Blackwing Lair shortly after its release, and we'd gotten to the point where the only boss we had left was Lord Nefarious himself. It was here where we hit a major wall and spent 3 or 4 weeks on Nefarian alone, usually clearing all pre-Nefarian bosses in just a night or two. It was around this time that I learned that there was a low-level offhand item called the Skull of Impending Doom, which increased your movement speed at the cost of your health for 10 seconds. If you died to this item's damage, your gear suffered no durability loss, and across our many wipes, a quick offhand swap saved me more gold than I'd care to admit. Being a tank, but not the main one, meant that for most of the fight I had almost no responsibilities. Once the ad phases were down, I was a free man when it came to my actions. With WoW add-ons being a near free-for-all in their scope, I also had a chess add-on that would let me play games against other people with the same add-on. This is where I let myself slip up and stumbled my way to victory. We started our final attempt of the night and most people were feeling pretty worn down. Nevertheless, everyone was giving it their very all. Well, most of us. I started the fight as I always did and tanked the ads before settling back into my heroic strike spam and 2 chess games with our main DPS rogue and one of the other secondary tanks, paying more attention to the games than the game. And I hardly noticed that we were actually kicking ass this go-round. Before finishing either of my chess matches, I glanced over to see a dead Nefarian in front of me with shouts of joy in vent. As I quickly changed into my Bloodsail Buccaneer getup to take a screenshot for our guild first downing, I couldn't help but notice that I still had the skull in my offhand from the previous attempt. And that's the tale of how I quote-unquote helped get my guild their first Nefarian kill as a warrior with a level 41 caster offhand while playing chess. That's a great story. And the last submission for Memory Lane this week is from listener Grogor, who tells us this story. While grinding the Scarlet Crusade mobs in Tyr's Hand, I was playing on my fierce dwarf rogue named Walgrim. Wearing a mix OG Tier 1 and Tier 2, and equipped with Perdition's Blade and Corehound's Tooth, I consider myself pretty well geared back then. While ripping through the packs of soldiers, I noticed activity, or the lack thereof, I should say. Dead Scarlet Crusade bodies lay scattered beside a horse wagon next to the entrance of the northernmost building. I realized that I wasn't alone and immediately threw on stealth and reapplied the poisons best suited for PvP. The hunt was on, and I was not going to be the victim. Not long after, a female orc warrior, whose name I've sadly forgotten, emerged from the doorway of the building in front of me. I quickly evaluated my odds. The warrior had around 80% life, was equally well geared, and was equipped with the mighty Zin Rock, Destroyer of Worlds. I turned up the volume of my Winamp PvP playlist, which was blasting Coheed and Cambria, and then I drew my daggers. I opened with Chief Shot and began my standard stun lock to death rotation. The filthy orc warrior then resisted my kidney shot, but then I quickly realized they weren't fighting back. A split second later, I noticed an emote in the chat window. Orc warrior ponders my actions. What? The idiot wasn't even gonna fight back? This fight was gonna be way too easy. Or so I thought. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the warrior jumped to the side, charged in and attacked me. First hit was a massive crit, then procced both his sword specializations as well as his trinket, which resulted in 2 more devastating critical strikes. In a matter of seconds, the tables had turned and I was losing. Just before I hit my blind button, he managed to throw off his fear. I quickly hammered my PvP trinket button, but to no avail, since of course I forgot to equip the damn thing. Just as my pump-up song was coming to an end, he once more pondered my actions and then finished me off with a critical strike execute. Laying there on the ground, I thought to myself, what the fuck just happened? And if that wasn't enough, the orc scum just charged into another pack of Scarlet Crusaders and kept on his grind, like nothing even happened. He didn't even bother to bandage or eat to get full health. That was the day I learned to never underestimate your opponent. And that's Memory Lane for the week, everyone. Now, as I promised you at the start of the show, there would be a sneak peek of the Alex Sensual interview that is going to be published on Wednesday morning in just 2 days' time. I'm going to play that now for you, and this is just 2 minutes of 80 that I spent talking with Alex as he answered every question I had for him without hesitation. And I'll note this before the show on Wednesday, but I don't know Alex Sensual at all. I hadn't even heard the name until about 2 months ago, but I've learned enough recently to get a good enough gauge on who he is, and I also researched everything that I could so that I could ask the best questions of him. Questions which, I should add, were not made known to Alex beforehand in any way. But nothing was off the table, he told me, and Countdown to Classic will talk to any player, notable or random, if they have extensive insights into WoW and its community, which I can assure you Alex did have. And so, without further ado, here's the 2-minute clip. Hang around afterwards for just a tiny bit more news, but here we go. Do you think it's fair to say that you're somewhat of a polarizing figure in the Classic community?
What do you mean by polarizing?
I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you receive or read or do you tune in at all to what people say about you online, or you just tune it out?
Oh, yeah. I'm well aware that people don't like me, but I think they have the right to do that. I think they have the right to, and that's the other thing too is, it's funny because a lot of people, they talk badly about the channel or badly about me in an instance, or if they might, first of all, that happens to everybody. Everybody gets haters. Second of all, I think it's fair game. Absolutely. I mean, it depends on where you're having the discussion. But like, for example, you don't go to somebody's house and tell them, you don't go to somebody's house and insult them. That's just not how I would do things. I mean, that's how I lived my entire life. I mean, I don't go into somebody's house and say, wow, your house is garbage. That's for a different place at a different time.
Right.
And so I think anybody can talk badly about anybody, or not just badly, but have an opinion. I think everybody's have the right to an opinion, even if it's Alex Sensual, even if it's Tally or Kunkin or Asmongold or anybody really. I'm not comparing myself to those people, but those are just examples of content creators, of known famous ones. And I think it's completely fair game. I mean, the best example I can give is in real life. I mean, there's people that have jobs that do things differently. There's different people, I know you said that you're a lawyer. I mean, there's different lawyers that do different things. There's different television anchors that have different opinions. There's different sports analysts. There's different analysts for everything in life. I mean, the chances of you agreeing with every single person is just never going to happen. You're going to have your favorite content creators. You're going to have your favorite analysts that talk about games or video games or sports. A content creator on YouTube, like, you're going to subscribe to the people you like. And I think that's completely fair game to have an opinion about somebody else, whether, I just think it's personally just completely fair game because it happens in real life on a daily basis.
Now, if you're busting to hear more of that chat, guess what? It's less than 48 hours away, so mark that one on the things to do list for the week. Now, as far as show news goes, I know you're all on the edge of your seats, but sadly, Paraguay Watch continues as we all hold our breath and wait for a fellow WoW player in Paraguay to listen to the show. But while we wait on that great South American nation, I just want to shout out to the following countries who've been more than getting amongst it with Countdown to Classic. Iceland, what is up? The Netherlands, you crazy Dutch bastards, you've been eating the show up. Thank you so much for listening. Puerto Rico, como estas? And a state in those amazing United States, Cali. Holy shit, have you guys been downloading the show? Thank you so much. And a note that I will hopefully be making my way out to Cali in November this year and February next year. So who knows, maybe a beer or 20 with the fans is on the cards then. And I just want to give a final shout out to listener Sam, who you might remember emailed me a while ago regarding wanting his girlfriend to play WoW with him. And I replied. And Sam got back to me and said, "Hey Josh, I'm emailing you in shock after just listening to episode 7's section on getting the other half into WoW. Firstly, thank you for that. It made us both crease with laughter. Secondly, we have another recruit in the Horde. The only issue is she wants to roll whatever I roll. Typical. Thanks again. It made my day, Sam." And I would say I'm more than happy to help, Sam. And with that, I shall see you all on Wednesday for Countdown's first ever in-depth interview with Alex Sensual. And I can't wait to bring you these interviews weekly. The ones I have ready to go are all amazing. And then Law will follow that interview on Friday with an episode all about Stratholme. So I'll see you then, everyone. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.